Chairman,
we'd all like that.
Sorry to interrupt you, but please could members turn off their videos and their microphones because it's 10 o'clock and you need to start the meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues, Smith and Dare. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Co-Ordination of Council Business Group. Before consideration of today's business, I will outline the protocols for the meeting. Today's meeting has been live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and has also been recorded. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I will adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I will adjourn the meeting for a short period to try and establish their connection. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. As I call members to speak, I will remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic officer will advise you. Votes will be taken using the raise your hand function and the result announced by the Democratic Services Officer. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting, their departure will be confirmed, and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. I'm minded to take a break after item 4, comfort break, but we'll see how the meeting progresses. To confirm the procedure for today's meeting is that committee members who wish to speak on an item should indicate by typing X in the chat box. Before we start today's business, I will ask the Democratic Services Officer to confirm members and officers' attendance.
Thank you, Chairman. Anita Searby, Democratic Services. I will now call members' names individually, and please could you confirm your name and your electoral division. So, Councillor German.
Hello, Anita. Councillor Julian German, Leader of the Council, Roseland Electoral Division.
Councillor Painter.
Adam Painter, Deputy Leader, Councillor for Yorkston North and North Petherwin.
Councillor Jeff Brown.
Good morning, Councillor Jeff Brown. I'm the Cabinet Member for Transport and represent Newquay Central.
Councillor Buscombe.
Councillor Buscombe, representing Padstow and St Mirren.
Councillor Dwelly. Councillor Dwelly.
Hello, sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, sorry, I just had to unmute there. Thanks, Anita. Tim Dwelly, Penzance East, and Cabinet Member for Culture, Economy and Planning.
Councillor Ethorne Gibbons.
Good morning, Mike Ethorne Gibbons, Cabinet Member for Customers, representing Lennox and Clement and St Erme.
Councillor Frank.
Good morning all, I'm Hilary Frank and I represent the good folk of Saltash South and I'm the Chair of Cornwall Council.
Councillor Hannaford.
Good morning, Councillor Edwina Hannaford, Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Neighbourhoods, representing Lew West, Lansallas and Lanteglos Division.
Councillor Hawken.
Good morning, Sally Hawken, Cabinet Member for Children, Wellbeing and Public Health and Liscard East.
Councillor McKenna.
Morning everyone, Councillor Jim McKenna, Cornwall Councillor, Penzance Promenade.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell is apologies for late arrival. Councillor Rogerson.
Thank you. Pat Rogerson, Member for Bodmin St Leonard and Chair of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Good morning.
Councillor Rule.
Good morning, everybody. Carolyn Rule, Councillor for Mullion and Grade Ruin, and I'm the Chairman of the Neighbourhood Scrutiny Committee.
Councillor Toms. Sorry. Councillor Toms.
Councillor Armand Toms, Lew East and St Martin's Division, and the Chair of Health and Social Care Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll now read the names of the officers that are supporting the meeting today. We've got Kate Canally, the Chief Executive, Tracy Langley, the Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer, Phil Mason, the Strategic Director for Economic Growth and Development, Sophie Hoskin, Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods, is due to join the call, Matt Barton, the Head of the Chief Executive's Office, Andrea Cooper, Service Director for Adult Social Care and Transformation, Kate Evan-Hughes, Service Director for Education, and Alex Pollock, Head of Council Support and Democratic Process, and also Jen Fishwick-Hannaford, who's the Cabinet and Civic Office Manager. That concludes the names of members and officers present today, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is the apologies for absence. So Democratic Services Officer, if you could give us those.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillors Nolan and Rochell, apologies for late arrival from Councillor Mitchell, apologies for early departure from Jeff Brown. We also, from officers, we have apologies from Helen Charlesworth-May, who's the Strategic Director for Adult Social Care, and Andrea Cooper is substituting for her. We have apologies from Meredith Teasdale, who's the Strategic Director for Together for Families, and Kate Evan-Hughes, the Service Director for Education, is substituting for her. And apologies from Melanie O'Sullivan, who's the Council's Monitoring Officer, and Alex Pollock, the Head of Council Support and Democratic Process, is substituting for her. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Councillor Hannaford, you've raised your hand.
Yeah, apologies for potential early departure, as I'm leading an all-member briefing at 12 o'clock, should the meeting go on that long.
Thank you. And so if I can remind colleagues to use X in the chat, meeting chat, if you'd like to come in and use the raise your hand function for the votes. Thank you. The next item is agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest that they would like to make? No. Okay, so the next item is agenda item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of January 2020. So firstly, can I seek a proposer and seconder for those?
Happy to propose, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne-Gibbons, and Councillor Painter to second. Has anyone got any matters of accuracy that they would wish to raise?
Chairman, just on page 2.4, it is accurately recorded, but clearly following the demise of Flyby, the Gatwick Heathrow, the service moving back to Gatwick never happened, and I'll update members later on the change.
Thank you. And Councillor Painter.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on page 3, there is in little 7, halfway through that paragraph, there is just a spelling mistake where CAMS is noted on the previous paragraph, but the letters are the wrong way round on the second time it was noted. Whether we could just have that changed, please.
Thank you, Councillor Painter. Yes, we'll change that. So we've had a proposer and seconder. Any further items to be raised? In which case, all of those in favour, if you can... Oh, sorry, no, I need to go to the Democratic Services Officer to take the vote. Anita, please. I think I should. Or shall I just ask people to raise their hand?
Yeah, please, no? Sorry, I was on mute, Chairman. Please, would all members in support of the minutes raise their hands?
Anita, forgive me. I need to abstain. I wasn't there.
Okay, yeah, I'll call for abstentions in a minute. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 7 members showing support for those minutes. 8. So that's 7 members for. Please, could those members who lower their hands now, and then we'll call for any against. Please would members raise their hands if they wish to vote against the minutes. I think that's a reasonable time. Any abstentions, please raise your hands. Thank you, Chairman. The motion is carried. 7 votes in support and 5 abstentions. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. So the next item is the feedback from Cabinet, the Chairman of the Council, and overview and scrutiny committee members. Let me take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Tim Dwelly to this meeting, the first time that he will have attended as Cabinet Member for Culture, Economy and Planning. Welcome, Tim. Great to have you with us. I'm going to go through in some sort of order in terms of scrutiny chairs and then relevant cabinet members. And I know we haven't had many of these meetings, but I'm going to do that, starting with Councillor Toms in reverse alphabetical order. So Councillor Toms, Chair of Adults Overview and Scrutiny, would you like to start with your report, please?
Yes, thank you, Julian. Yes, the Adults Social Care and Health Scrutiny Committee have had their agenda set in time, and the work programme for the future has been set up. I feel that everybody's had their chance to have their say, and we look forward to bringing a number of subjects forward and to working with Councillor Pat Rogerson over the issue of children's mental health. In general, we've had a lot of briefings to catch up with what's happened over the COVID period. It has been key to building the knowledge within the committee of what's actually gone on, because things have had to happen to make sure that the system has functioned. I'd like to thank all the officers that have been involved in that. They've done some amazing work over the last few months, and all the committee, and I speak for all of the committee in saying that we greatly appreciate what they've done and how they've done it. They've achieved things that perhaps in normal times would have taken years in weeks, and some of the systems that they've brought together will be kept for the future, which is testimony to that. Both a thanks from the committee to all of those that have taken part. In general, things are okay. It's the test and trace that still raises concerns within some members of the committee, and how they're going to engage if something needs to be locked down with the local members, so that they're key to passing the messages from the council out to the local community. Other than that, Leader, things are looking okay, and we look forward to our meeting, which is next week.
Thank you very much, Councillor Toms. So we've apologies from Councillor Rothschild, who's on the South West Council's Adult Lead Members meeting. I know the portfolio, the Scrutiny Committee also covers part of Councillor Hawkins' roles, but I'll come to Councillor Hawkins after Councillor Rogerson. So if we can go to Councillor Rule next as Chair of Neighbourhood Scrutiny, please, Councillor Rule.
Yes, good morning, Julian. Not an awful lot to report. We've had our first meeting where we set our agenda and did our work programming work, and that went very well, I thought. We've gone through what we planned to do, and obviously with the current situation, some things are having to be dropped and other things being brought forward. And we had quite a good work programming meeting with that. I thought it went quite well. We've got a mock meeting later on today, and our first formal meeting is next week. So probably after that, I'll be able to report back more fully. But it all seems to be going okay, and the pre-agenda went quite well as a virtual meeting. It was, I think, probably we'll carry on doing it that way in the future, because it seems silly to drag everybody into County Hall if we don't need to. But yeah, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you very much, Councillor Rule. Councillor Hannaford, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I did attend the agenda setting work programme. That I can concur that meeting went really well chaired. No problems. From a cabinet member's perspective, I've carried on with lots of partnership working across the council and with our external partners. So the Library Forum partnership, climate change sector partnership, and climate change or member briefing today. So although I feel that some of my work has been curtailed because senior officers were in the shielding programme, really important work, we've tried to keep things going and maintain. Oh, and we had the chairs and of the community network panels meeting yesterday, which was really very good, and lots of good learning there for the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hannaford. So we'll go next to Councillor Nolan's also within the purview of that committee. His apologies this morning. So we'll go next to Councillor Rogerson, Chair of the Children's and Families Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I want to just refer to the minutes. It mentioned that the Directorate Together for Families was obviously progressing the building of relationships with the new senior officers, and I just want to take a moment to pay tribute to the work that they've done in this past 3 or 4 months. I know that Kate has been with her team trawling through the minutiae of the constant changing guidance that was coming to schools, and meeting weekly and occasionally on a daily basis with head teachers, and I'm aware of how grateful they were to have this work done and that close liaison. So thank you for that. And also to Ben, in terms of children's services, we were, as a council, and it's a huge success, actually tracking 3,000 vulnerable children during the last 3 or 4 months. So I just want to pay tribute to them and to thank them for the work that they've done, Leader. We too have had our work programming session. Meredith presented us with a very worthwhile paper that we were able to focus our minds on what had been happening to young people, and also looking forward to recovery. So we've looked at grouping the work that we're going to do, some of which will be new, some of which was originally on the plan, under the headings of the best start in life, prevention and early identification, SEND and complex needs, the transition to adulthood, the Ofsted improvement plan, and inclusion in all its aspects. So I don't know, Leader, whether you want me to specify for the live stream how that's broken down. I can do that if you want, but presumably that could be published. So I don't know whether you want me to read it out or not.
It's up to you, Councillor Rogerson. Perhaps if it's lengthy, not people can find it on the website, but if it's short, then
okay.
Please do.
Okay, the brief headings are looking at the COVID response and recovery plan, children's emotional and mental health, the financial plan, prevention and early intervention, looking at family hubs and the way that they're working locally, the Ofsted inspection, as I've mentioned, the safeguarding annual plan, inclusion in and our schools, early years, listening to children and young people, budget again, emotion, health and well-being, targeted and specialist support, and the complex needs, including the autism strategy. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rogerson. And Councillor Hawken, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd echo the things said there in terms of needing to thank our staff from both Together for Families and Public Health for their huge efforts in responding to the pandemic. It's certainly been extraordinary in humbling to hear of examples of staff going well above and beyond. If we're doing numbers, yesterday's number for COVID support plans within Together for Families was 19,705. It's just an extraordinary volume of work. And the context for all of this was Rachel Wigglesworth new in post just before national lockdown, a new senior management team in Together for Families with 3 out of 4 new to Cornwall. So it's been very much people having to hit the ground running. Scrutiny engagement is usually the subject we talk about here. This has necessarily been different, but hopefully acceptable. So information through the core briefings, the leaders briefing, and latterly the cell briefings. Councillor Tom's reference feeling well informed, which is pleasing. Councillor Hodgson has given detail of the development session, the plans for the remainder of scrutiny meetings, so I won't repeat those there. But I think that we have managed to keep in touch. And in terms of Councillor Tom's part about local members, I know of 2 different areas in Cornwall where local members have been contacted recently from the public health team to talk through situations in their locality. So I think that we are doing our best to try and honour the things that we agreed in the local outbreak management board. I probably missed a letter there. LOMP it is, isn't it? Local Outbreak Management Plan Engagement Board. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hawken. Councillor McKenna, the next over you in scrutiny chair. Councillor McKenna, please.
Leader, thank you. A quick sort of tour, really. Economic Growth and Development over in scrutiny is the committee which has met of the 5 scrutiny committees. I think it's fair to say it was an interesting meeting. We certainly took our full allocation of time with time band in terms of recording. Indeed, I got a reminder at 20 to 2 that we might go dead at 2 o'clock. So there was, I think it's fair to say, plenty of discussion and debate during the meeting. I want, before going into a bit more detail, to thank the officers of Dem Services who did a fabulous job in what turned out to be quite a challenging meeting. I think they did a really, really good job, and the support both before and after from Dem Services in this has been excellent. I guess while I'm thanking, I should also thank the Cabinet members who've been really supportive. For the first time in my chairmanship, all reports were produced in advance of the deadline, so there were no reports sent out or tabled, which was fortunate as we were working remotely. And I should thank also particularly the staff working in the areas of economy and planning. The primary issues for Tuesday's meeting were obviously work programme is a standing item, but the COVID response and recovery in the context of economy and housing and planning and transport, and also a really good and lively session on climate change. In October, I'm delighted, as all scrutiny committee chairs will be, that we are getting the opportunity to look at the budget at an early stage. That was a challenge, I think it's fair to say, in terms of setting the current year's budget. So great that the need for oversight and scrutiny of that at an early stage has been recognised, so thank you for that. And the remainder of the October meeting will focus primarily on housing issues, rough sleeping, and the review chaired by Councillor Olivier in terms of private sector rented, along with anything else that comes up as a matter of urgency before then. A couple of observations really in terms of how Tuesday went. I've agreed this with Councillor Duffin, the Vice Chair. I think there is an issue with using hands to vote. There are 2 primary reasons for that. One, not all members are necessarily as geared up to use that as possibly they could be, but also there were 1 or 2 malfunctions. One particular councillor had limited control of her hand, that's the on-screen hand, throughout the meeting, and that did cause some confusion with one of the votes towards the end. So my suggestion, I've spoken to Dem Services, to Anita and Alex amongst others about this, certainly from my committee, I want to see roll call introduced in terms of voting in future. It will definitely save time. I observed it working really well at council. And when you've only got 15 members maximum voting on something, it's something you can do in probably a couple of minutes. The hand voting arrangements, particularly where there were difficulties, took 5 or 6 minutes per vote in some cases. So that is one change I'd like to have introduced, at least for my committee, for October. And I raised that at group meeting yesterday as well. And the second thing I'd be looking to change, it's fair to say I have a number of members who are quite loquacious. They do enjoy a good talk. That isn't necessarily conducive to the reduced time we have in terms of getting business done. So I will be using my chair's discretion to limit members to 2 minutes per contribution per item on the agenda, in a way following what council did, and that worked really, really well last week. So that would be my primary feedback. I do want to sort of advertise, if you will, an event on the 28th of July, 10 till 12. It's an informal development session for members. All members can attend, and it does feature a brief presentation and question and answer from Bill Grimsey. Now, I know he divides opinion, but in my opinion, he's certainly worth listening to. And with the way in which town centres have struggled through COVID, I do think the wider sort of access to information, informed view and experience we have as council, the better we'll be able to come out of this. So if members are available, 10 o'clock, 28th of July, it'd be good to see a full number. That's pretty much all I want to say, other than to say, as with, I think it was Edwina who mentioned this, but it might not have been, informal member briefings, chairman's briefings, pre-agenda meetings and things. I certainly intend doing those remotely in future. That'll save time for me. It'll also help the environment, which is something I'm keen to do. But I am really keen, as soon as it's safe, to get back to round table meetings for committees in particular. And I would hope we could look to progress that as soon as it's reasonable to do so. That's all I wanted to say at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McKenna. So a couple of points potentially for discussion there. So we'll pick those up once we've come through the updates from others. So in terms of cabinet members, thank you, that are within your committee's purview. Councillor Dwelly next, please.
Thank you, Julian, and thank you, Jim. Yes, it's good to see the Scrutiny Committee back in action, and I agree with Jim on the need, ideally, for live meetings for the committee itself, and I also agree with not having everyone going to County Hall for every tiny meeting. I know that's our intention. It's should be a relatively exciting time for the Scrutiny Committee members, because quite a few things that they asked for are now very much on the agenda and happening, particularly the amount of work being done to help town centres and high street vitality, which is something I'm working on a lot with my economy brief. We have a £4 million programme coming up, which includes money for towns that want to work up plans for new projects, and that might be something that helps them go for future town deal funds from government if they announce such a thing. The main activity I've had to prioritise recently after taking on this post was the grants being paid, discretionary grants to businesses across Cornwall. That's going well, but we are 3,500 applications in that we haven't yet been able to fund, because we're waiting on government to decide whether we'll be allowed to use the 27 million that we've asked for that's in the bank in Cornwall, which we hope we can, and we very much appreciate the help of some MPs to make the case for that, and we're still hopeful. The other big project, working with Edwina Hannaford, who is portfolio holder for climate change emergency, is the DPD on climate change. This document is I think, coming along at a very good pace, and was discussed at scrutiny. Some very interesting comments there, but it does look like we're going to get that in place in good time, which is very helpful. One of the things I'd like to raise is, and this goes beyond just this committee and the portfolio I have, but we are in an era now, it seems, of government asking for very rapid response to spending announcements. So, for example, the LEP was asked to very quickly specify what turned out to be £14 million worth of projects. And equally, in towns that have town deals, there have been announcements made of £500,000 or £750,000 to be specified again at breakneck speed. So one lesson I'd like to have us all learn is, how does Cornwall Council overall respond at pace to the need to quickly agree what to spend money on when required to do so we don't lose the money? And that will have implications for procurement and also for officer time. So that's something I'd like to raise. And I suppose it's also relevant to scrutiny committees, because it's not going to be very easy to have the usual flow of scrutiny when you have something where you've only got a few weeks to put in a proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly. Agility is certainly something that we've experienced and would be good to be able to keep to a good extent. And as you say, that may lead to more post-scrutiny rather than pre-scrutiny, but a discussion to be had, certainly. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I would concur with Councillor McKenna about the issue of the hand raising at the overview scrutiny. It did cause a few technical problems and some delays, so that might well be worth looking at. And also the transport team been working very closely with the local councils in terms of developing safe high streets as we move forward out of COVID. And our car park teams, enforcement actually sits with Councillor Nolan, but the car park enforcement teams have been very proactive in helping wherever they can. This year we particularly seem to be facing an issue of problems with mobile homes camping overnight in car parks, and only this morning in Newquay we had an issue with 12 cars who have set up a temporary campsite in one of our Waterworld car parks in Newquay, which is now being dealt with. But it's an issue that we were expecting, because not all campsites have opened, and those that have are restricting access to bookings only, and a lot of people are coming down on spec, finding nowhere to go. So wild camping is going to be a real challenge for us this summer. Two other bits of good news to update you on. I said that there was not an error in the minutes of the last meeting. The minutes spoke about returning the PSO from Heathrow back to Gatwick. That hasn't happened because that was with Flybe. We had the double impact of Flybe's demise and also COVID-19, which effectively closed the airport to everything but emergency traffic for a number of weeks. There's been a huge restructure around the airport. We're now going forward again. Ryanair have started flying to Alicante and Faro. There was an issue last week with a new form that's been introduced for passengers returning from abroad, which had to be completed online before they could go through the airport. Unfortunately, it's a Ryanair issue, not ours. Ryanair hadn't been able to contact all their passengers to tell them to do it, so there was quite a bit of delay in people getting back into the country when they came back to Newquay Airport. The other positive is Eastern Airways. That's a new airline for us. They've started flying Teesside and Leeds Bradford, and I'm delighted to inform everybody that from next Friday, British Airways are going to pick up the public service obligation route from Heathrow to Newquay, and for July that'll be running 3 days a week, increasing to 5 in August and 7 days a week from September. So the airport is looking healthy going forward. In addition to that, on Wednesday I had a really positive meeting with Rachel McLean MP, who's the Under-Secretary, Parliamentary Secretary of State with specific responsibility for space. We gave her a briefing on space from the space team and Ian Jones from Goonhilly. She was incredibly receptive, particularly about the value that it will bring for our young people in terms of future prosperity and jobs. And has promised to chase up on the regulations that we need to make sure that the spaceport is effectively operating from Newquay completely legally and with as light a touch as possible. The only other issue that we're looking at the moment, one that's come out of COVID, is the issue of speeding. Although traffic reduced at one point to 20% of the norm, speeding has been an increasing problem all the way through the lockdown. We're looking at it as a county-wide issue, and the transport team are looking at what they can do. There's already a trial going on in Newton Abbot for 20-mile-an-hour zone across the entire town, and we're watching that very carefully to see how that works. So that's something we're looking at for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. And Councillor Mitchell had an urgent St Ives Town Council meeting. He hasn't joined us yet. So I'll go to the Chair of the Council next, Councillor Frank, who I'm sure, along with group leaders and democratic services, are looking at how all of the meetings are functioning and learning as we go. Councillor Frank, please.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Councillor Chairman. And I'd just like to refer to full council in July, our first ever meeting of full council in our brave new virtual world. And really, my heartfelt appreciation to all the councillors, especially group leaders. Everybody showed such discipline, such collaboration, and together with excellent support from our democratic services team and our IT teams, the meeting thankfully went extremely smoothly. And I think, guys, that was a great service for democracy in Cornwall. So we are constantly reviewing the format of full council to make sure it will be the best it possibly can be. And we're hopeful that improvements to the online voting solution, I hear what Councillor McKenna says about the roll call, and I think that is a very democratic way forward. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback here. Can you hear me, or have I frozen?
We can hear you fine, Hilary.
Okay, fine, good. Sorry, I hear what Councillor McKenna is saying about the roll call in smaller committee meetings. I am conscious though that it did take, oh goodness, we had about 8 votes at a full council and 8 minutes per vote. We spent about an hour voting online, and if we can review that to shorten that time a bit going forward, that would hopefully reduce the overall length of future meetings. But I think that's it. It was so good to have that democratic full council back in operating in action. Back to you, Councillor German.
Thank you very much, Councillor Frank. And to the Chair of Customers Support Services next, Councillor Buscombe, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. In June, we had an informal meeting at which we received an update on the Council's response to COVID-19, and we also looked at our work programme for the year. Our work programme for the rest of the municipal year includes a good spread across the Directorate's activities, some to be brought to formal meetings, others will be dealt with informally. One of the main issues that we want to look at is the budget, and I'll say some more about that when we get to item 5. Our task and finish group for the year will be working on developing local supply chains with a view to supporting local suppliers and the voluntary sector and making sure we can add social value. We'll also be checking on the work that we've done previously, and I do feel this is so important that we don't just do a piece of work, a task and finish group, a day's inquiry, and then forget about the recommendations. I've always been very keen that we should revisit those recommendations and make sure that they're still being implemented. So that's a brief resume of what we've been doing since the last meeting. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Buscombe. Absolutely agree, really important to follow up the work that Scrutiny's done so we can see what effect it's had. Councillor Ethel Gibbons next, please.
Thank you, Leader. It's been fairly busy just recently. One item I would highlight immediately is the question of our leisure centres and GLL's role in that. There is an intention to open a number of leisure centres from the 25th of July. A press release has gone out on that, indicating which ones will be opening. They'll only be partially operational because of the impact of COVID. There also will be a number that are not yet planned to be opened. It's not entirely clear why that is the case, but there seem to be some health and safety issues connected with that, and I certainly will be following those up. Elsewhere, discussions will continue again early next week on the request from GLL for financial support. Because of COVID and other things, it looks as though their initial pitch is likely to be increased, and we'll have to consider exactly how we respond to that. I do intend keeping in close contact with our officers as these things go forward. Elsewhere, as far as my portfolio is concerned, property, Treveth continued to get ready to start the physical work on their 5 housing projects. Meanwhile, they have been asked to take on a number of the council's commercial projects. And at this point in time, it's unclear which ones they will actually take forward, which ones they'll probably ask to be closed because they're not viable, and some which they'll hand back to the council. So a lot more work to be done on that side of things. Also, the role of Treveth going forward is being looked at in terms of having a wider property role and what involvement they may have in the mixed-use developments at Langarth and Pydar Street, as well as any facilities management support on council offices. And of course, we've got to bear in mind here that facilities management is also undertaken by Core Serve, so we've got to get the balance right and make sure there isn't duplication or omission. So some further work to be done on that. As far as the rest of my portfolio is concerned, Core Serve, the furloughed staff on highways are now coming back, so that's looking good. The officers continue to doing a superb job on the people support side of things, so that's looking good as well. As far as Wave Hub is concerned, discussions continue in the background to look at the disposal of its operations with various interested parties. The only other issue or a couple of issues I would mention is following full council, there was a procurement motion, and I'm speaking with Jane Kirkham about that early next week, and then there will be a further meeting with officers to put some flesh around her proposals, and hopefully we'll be able to resolve that fully in September. I would have liked it to have been earlier, but because of the holiday breaks in August, we're going to have to leave it until probably September to do that. The only other thing of interest, and I'm sure members will be interested, is I did a piece with Graham Smithy yesterday about my portfolio. So you'll be able to see me in glorious Technicolor later today on his website. That's all I have to say, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eacorn-Gibbons. Councillor Painter, please.
Thank you, Leader. Within the portfolio, first of all, I'd like to thank all the finance staff who've really kept the show on the road over this pandemic period, where clearly we've had very different modes of operation, but they've managed to keep things going as far as paying all our contractors and ensuring all our staff have been paid, and we've had no real issues as far as that's concerned. Clearly budgets have been stretched because of the pandemic, and we're working hard to make sure that we can monitor where those costs are and monitor where we may be able to claw back some of those costs. We've just recently had a further just a fraction under 5 million from central government. So that's very much appreciated, but that means in total we've had just under 40 million in unring-fenced grants from central government, but we do know that our costs are over and above 74 million at the moment. So there's still a significant gap in the costs of COVID and obviously the loss of income. And I think the loss of income is something that shouldn't be underestimated, because the loss of income will continue, certainly not just for this year, but going into next year. Obviously, we have everything crossed to hope that we don't get a further spike or another lockdown going into the autumn, which really would be very testing, I think, for the whole country, but certainly for Cornwall as well. So we hope things obviously go as smoothly as possible with our summer season, which is gearing up for the summer holidays over the next few weeks. So we hope that financially we're not impacted too much more, but clearly that is a concern for everybody to make sure the budgets are right. And clearly the next item on our agenda is talking about forward planning for our budgets and forward planning looking for next year's budget. So we'll be setting that in February going forward for the budget for 2021-22, which clearly will be very important, but not particularly easy to predict at the moment how that's going to pan out, depending on how things pan out across Cornwall and across the country, and how the pandemic could impact on that further. So that's just a quick update on financial matters and how they relate to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Painter. So Councillor Mitchell has joined us now. So Councillor Mitchell, if you'd like to update from the housing portfolio perspective, thank you.
Sure, thank you, Leader. So we all know of the fabulous work that the housing team within Cornwall Council, CHL, and those charity and volunteer groups have done in helping to get all the people who were sleeping off the street. We now have identified and engaging with 100 plus people. The government stance officially is still everyone in, although certainly the government and ourselves are now moving into the phase of move on, and there are a number of people who are sort of in the wrong place and in the wrong accommodation, but that was suitable while we were dealing with the emergency stage of the pandemic. But as I say, our thoughts and efforts now slightly have an emphasis change. So Monkey Tree was a site that we used, probably currently down from about 45 households to 30. We're trying to make that even lower. The site owner did want all those people placed by us off when our agreement and contract ran out on the 30th of June. But after officers sort of saying that we really need some help from yourselves, they said, oh yeah, we've got these 20 caravans sort of at the back of our site over there, and you can keep people on low or ideally no need and support. So they're still being used. Tren Creek are actually a sort of everyday provider, network provider for Cornwall housing, and we use them on a regular basis. That did peak at about 70 families, and we've admitted that there were some issues with the management by the site, and also an oversight by us in not putting support there at the beginning. So there were some issues. That's down to about 40 families at present, and a family could be a single person when I say that figure. And the owner and ourselves wish to see that go to around 10 to 15 families, which would actually be the normal usage that Cornwall Housing Limited would be having with Tren Creek. We've taken 40 other bookings across the whole of Cornwall through the provider network. Those can be from rooms to flats to properties, and we'll be using all of those. We've also taken an option on 50 beds every day with Travel Lodge. There's no such thing as a blacklist, but the way Travel Lodge just unilaterally said, we're going to shut, here's your 50 families back, you need to house them within 24 hours because we're going to shut, despite the government saying that they could stay open for local authority appointments to their rooms. But needs must. So we won't be wasting any money. If we don't need the 50 beds every day, then they will be cancelled before noon, so we don't have to get charged. and currently that is for the rest of this month and the whole of August. There's a number of announcements of cash from government as this has gone up their agenda, which is good news. It seems to be announcement after announcement with no detail and possibly new money. It isn't. About a month ago, they announced that they were putting £440 million into housing and mainly move-on properties, which they've now announced 130 million is available. That's not new money. That's actually part of the 440, and that's for they're looking for 3,300 properties, but they need to be in place and being used by March. So that really does exclude new builds and will require us to look at purchases and conversions. So I have told staff that any division which is being looked at with the possibility of a purchase of a small hotel or B&B, which unfortunately has gone out of business, that the local member is informed and involved in those discussions, because I can understand, some sensitivity, particularly around St Austell at the moment, who believe that they have been a dumping ground for Cornwall Council housing and adult social care to put, shouldn't say, homeless or threatened with homeless people, and obviously we need to make sure that all the support needs come with those people. But it's quite promising. The government outside of London is dealing with 22 authorities for this scheme, with which Cornwall Council is one, and I think we're a well-respected partner with Homes England on that. So we hope to be able to, or we will be applying for cash, but we actually absolutely have no detail on how to do that, how it's going to be distributed. But there could be some kickback from members who find out that we're possibly thinking of purchasing a building in their divisions, and we will do all due diligence to make sure no area goes beyond the capability of what it has before it causes any hassle or problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So, colleagues, I'm not going to take too long. I gave a reasonably in-depth report at Cabinet, so I'll refer you to that, and anyone watching, if they want to understand more, a shorter report at the last full council meeting. But since the last full council meeting, I've met with the Secretary of State for MHCLG, Robert Jenrick. So 3 things from that meeting. Secretary of State's left in no doubt about Cornwall's ambition for devolution. He recognised that rural areas aren't necessarily always appropriate for an elected mayor, and welcomed us feeding into the government white paper on devolution. So we'll be taking up that opportunity and seeing what comes forward, hopefully early in the autumn. We were also able to put forward the case for funding for leisure centres that aren't run directly by councils. So over 50%, over 60% of leisure centres aren't run directly by councils. So all of those councils aren't receiving any recompense. Councils that directly run are receiving recompense through lost income. So there's a huge challenge for all of those areas of the country that have leisure services provided by other means. I'm really pleased to see that we've announced the reopening of leisure centres in a phased approach, but as with many other authorities, our provider has significant financial concerns. So we raised that with the Secretary of State and hope that action will be forthcoming. we also raised the discretionary business rates financing with him, and he was clear that he supported councils having access to extra resource, and that he was making that point clearly to the Chancellor. So it's a long time since we started making this point. I think the Leadership Board, the LAP, the Council were writing to Government back in May, and obviously no announcement yet, whilst many of their businesses are really struggling and making decisions about whether or not they will ever reopen. So the sooner that funding can come through, the better. Colleagues, hopefully you'll have also noticed that we've launched the Cornwall We Want. So in terms of the pandemic and people finding the challenges of the pandemic, but also thinking about how they want the future to be, we're really listening to our residents over the next few months, and this will feed into the budget process as well. What the residents want to see us doing, that will help to shape our budget proposals, as we've always been out to residents with our budget proposals, and beforehand helping getting them to help shape what we do. It may well be more of a virtual process this time, but I'm sure that reach is significant, and we'll do all that we can to reach people that don't have access to the internet in our Cornwall We Want consultation discussions and the budget discussions. Colleagues will also be aware of felt the Black Lives Matters protests in Cornwall and further afield. So in response to that, we've set up a BAME steering group feeding into the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Leadership Board. I've attended the first couple of meetings of that body, and the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Leadership Board will be looking at what we've done around the Cornwall-wide equality objectives over the last couple of years, since it came to the Leadership Board, where we've made progress, but also where we need to do more. So just a brief update from me, colleagues, on the leader role. Obviously, lots going on. In terms of the discussion that we've prompted here, committee discussions, as the chair of the council said, will be ongoing. But I noticed Alex Polak indicated to come in. I think it might be on that theme. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I'm conscious of time, and so I don't want to go into it in a huge amount of detail today. But I'm really happy to cover questions on this if members want me to. So a few things to mention, a few general things about how we're moving forward on this. First of all, we think it's about time we did another piece of comms from members that just kind of updates them on where we've got to on all the various bits and pieces on how these meetings are now working and how we're operating. C&G in September, Constitution and Governance Committee in September. Take a look back and review some of the technical aspects of this, and if there's anything we need to change constitutionally at that point, that's an opportunity to do that. And I've also been asked to produce a report in the next short while about sort of options for the future of how we operate in the member arena in general, and that would include taking a look at the results of the recent member survey and options for different ways of meeting in future and so on. And I'm intending to bring that to group leaders at the beginning of September. So on some of the specifics that have been raised through the meeting, the bit around whether we move to a roll call rather than hands up and so on. But actually, personally, I'm happy with that as a suggestion. We looked at the hands up option as something that was as close as possible to what it might be in a live setting, but and it may have some slight advantages. But actually, it's emerging clearly from practice as something that works well. Noting that a council takes a long time, we are looking at a kind of a technological solution to make that a bit quicker. if possible, and then after that we'll look at whether that's overkill for committees or not. As for speaking time limits, which were mentioned by Jim, some chairmen are trying that out at their own discretion at the moment. I know that planning chairs want to do this. We'll keep an eye on whether that's something that might need to be made constitutional or not, but we've got to keep bearing in mind that we're in a kind of potentially a temporary state at the moment. We don't yet know whether the sunset clause on this legislation will be extended and so on. So we'll have to just be careful about how we do that. And as for meeting in person as soon as possible, I'm happy to go into the detail of what the government advice currently is, but I don't want to take more time over this unless I need to. So if members are interested, I'm happy to cover that, but otherwise I wasn't going to. Was there something more that I just missed from the most recent discussion?
That's fine. We can pick it up if there is, Alex. Thank you. I think in terms of Councillor McKenna's comments, and he's going to be next to speak anyhow, so I won't try and speak for him. But from my own perspective, it is absolutely, as Councillor McKenna said, about when it's safe to do so. There's a keenness for formal meetings to be in person, but that's absolutely got to be when it's safe to do so. And from my perspective, we'll absolutely be following public health advice around that, making sure that if we're putting councillors and officers into confined spaces, that it is when it's safe to do so. Councillor McKenna, if you'd like to come back in, please.
Leader, thank you. It was literally just in relation, thank you, Alex, for the update. It was literally just to query whether restricting members to 2 minutes would need some sort of constitutional change, because my understanding from previous conversations is that should be within Chair's discretion. So I was simply indicating my intention to apply that from October, given the membership and their understanding is that wouldn't require a formal change. I just wanted to make members aware that was what I was proposing to do in October. If it does require some sort of constitutional change, then obviously I'll speak to C&G when they meet in September. But if that could be clarified, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor McKenna. That's certainly my understanding, that it's within the Chair's discretion. But if there's Deputy Monitoring Officer advice around this to the country, then if we can have that either in the meeting or afterwards, that would be very useful. Councillor Hannaford next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just wanted to give you a little bit of feedback from the Community Network Panel Chairs meeting yesterday around recommencement of face-to-face meetings. My sense was that most did not want to go back to how it was before, but acknowledge that there are difficulties, opportunities and difficulties in continuing as it is. All said, we must not restart until it's safe for all members of the community to meet face to face. That was really clear. So there was some feedback there about varying the times of the meetings. Some were meeting in the daytime. That meant different people could attend that wouldn't do normally. People going back to work was affecting that. The biggest problem, I think, was the need to make sure that there was public involvement. That was common across all network panels. Some had worked really hard in encouraging people, members of the public, to attend. So I'm not quite sure if it's a technological problem or we've just not publicised the fact that you can attend network panels remotely. So helping with the ease of technology and having a common platform, I think, was something that was universal. Most preferred Zoom, and we all know the problems of Zoom, but found that was more accessible to more members of the public. But the majority did see the benefits. For example, although the all-member briefing in a minute is not open to members of the public, we thought we perhaps would repeat that for all community network panels. So that would mean that I don't have to tour all 19 again pretend to tell my story or tell our story, we can do that in one mega meeting and anybody can attend. So I think we're probably going to conduct a bit of a survey to try and get a clearer view about from the community network panel's perspective. But there are differences of opinion. Some people just like the formality of a face-to-face, and yes, it's lovely to see people, but they also saw the benefits of to the climate, to carbon savings, to travelling time, and just making it could be made more accessible to more people. So an interesting little microcosm of face-to-face versus remote that we will do some work on and help with making some kind of sense of it all, really. I'm quite happy with remote, but not everybody is.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaford. Anita Serby next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I was just coming in, following up on what Alex was saying in response to Councillor McKenna's point about his ability to restrict speaking to 2 minutes. That's obviously within the Chairman's gift. The Chairman of the Council introduced this for the Council meeting. The Constitution and Procedure Rules do talk about 3 minutes speaking. So that is something that we will be looking at Constitution and Governance in Committee in September. But in the meantime, the chairman have got that freedom to use their discretion to restrict speaking to 2 minutes. And as with council, if they want to go as far as timing speeches and having stopwatches and all the things that we see at council, then that's obviously a matter for them as well to help manage that conduct of business.
Thank you very much, Anita. And while you're unmuted, please remind me, this item we don't need to take a vote on.
No, Chairman.
Thank you. So, colleagues, feels like we're coming towards the end of the feedback. Has anyone got anything else that they would like to raise? In which case, it feels as though we're moving along reasonably well. So rather than taking a break at this point, I think we'll move on to agenda item number 5, the budget 2020-21. The budget member engagement plan even. So Councillor Painter, I think we're going to introduce, and Ms Langley as to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, looking at the papers in front of us for the member engagement plan, this is really asking the recommendation that the group endorses the proposed budget 2021-22 member engagement plan. So it's following on really from cabinet working, so that we're currently having informal cabinet meetings to chat through the budget development, looking at how we bring the budget together for next year. And then we want to bring it across to have the chairs and vice chairs of scrutiny, look at the proposals, then take it through to an all-member briefing, and then go through the individual scrutiny committees to consider the draft budget proposals. And then working into next year, we'll consult further with members and further with scrutiny committees before bringing our final budget proposals to Cabinet on the 10th of February, and then the 23rd of February will be the full council to approve next year's budget and the financial strategy from 2021 to 2025 and set the council tax levels for next year. So it's highlighted in our papers today, looking at how we want to run those. So I think it's fairly similar to usual, although we are trying to make sure that we're a bit more comprehensive on it. We've started perhaps slightly earlier. As my introduction earlier talked about the difficulties we face during this pandemic, we really aren't sure of our income levels and how that will affect our budget next year. But I think we need to plan, and we need to plan carefully about how we take that forward and what those implications are. So I'm happy to hand over to Ms Langley, our Chief Finance Officer, if she'd like to give a little bit more detail about the process going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. So what you have here is the sort of culmination of conversations with both Adam as the portfolio holder for finance and with the chair of CAFOSC, who is responsible for looking at the whole budget in its whole. And one of the and what we're trying to do this year is slightly different from the way that we would normally that you would normally have seen it, in that we are looking at themes in our in the way that Cabinet set proposals for what the budget looks like, and which will give a much fuller set of recommendations about how we plan to make the budget stack up over the next 4 years. Councillor Painter is absolutely right that this year is extraordinary in my lifetime as a Director of Finance, in that we have so much uncertainty in our budgets, that trying to manage that forward is really difficult. But not forgetting, of course, that we had a bit of a budget gap anyway that we need to think about too. So one of the things that Councillor Buscombe, as the chair of CASOSC, has asked for is more upfront ability to look at how the budget is being put together and what the proposals look like, so that the overview and scrutiny committees are able to ask the right questions, certainly once we get to sort of the final proposals coming towards February. So we have put more time into the planning in order that the OSCs have more ability to discuss some of those proposals rather than it being a bit of a rush. The other thing that we've made sure of this time is to ensure that the CASOSC committee, the overview and scrutiny that looks at the overall budget, goes after all of the other overview and scrutinies, so that the CASOSC chair is able to take the views of all of the other overview and scrutinies into their overview session. I hope all of that makes sense. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tracy. And Councillor Buscombe's going to come in next. Colleagues, if you'd like to indicate with an X in the meeting chat if you'd like to come in. Councillor Buscombe, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, thank you for that, Tracy. That was very helpful. Can I just sort of begin by saying that in my 3 years as chair of CASOSC Scrutiny, I've been very, pleased and proud of the work that we've done on a wide range of issues, and how well we've worked constructively across party lines. However, I have to say that I don't think we've ever really got to grips with this question of scrutinising the budget. And this has concerned me. This is the last year of this council before we go to elections next year, and I'd really like to put something on record that would, help future scrutiny committees really get to grips with this more successfully, in my view. And this year I've discussed this with Tracy, and she's been incredibly helpful on this. I've also had discussions with the chairs of the other scrutiny committees, because talking to members generally, I feel that there's a general feeling across the council that members can't really input into this, and it's often put to us too late in the process. So next Friday, for example, we've got an informal meeting of all scrutiny chairs and vice chairs just on this subject of, when we say scrutinise the budget, what exactly do we mean? I'm just reminded of something that Councillor Biggs said at our last meeting down in County Hall, where he said, looking at the draft budget that was submitted in September and looking at the budget that we passed today, what actually has changed? And it's bugged me for the last 3 years that I don't think we actually do scrutinise this budget, and I just want to really try and tease this out in my last year of chairmanship. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buscombe. Councillor Toms, please.
Thank you, Julian. I totally agree with what Councillor Buscombe has just been saying. You know, each year we get the budget, and you know, we can change things internally within the area of scrutiny, but we have no ability to actually change things so that things across scrutiny committees can change, and that worries me. But in the area of health and adult social care, we are carrying a rolling over of savings of about £7 million. How are we going to deal with that in light of the extra pressures that will be on health and social care in the future, when we can't probably change things from other areas so that we can combine them to make them cheaper and more sustainable? Because at the moment, every scrutiny committee just looks at what their area, and there's not this ability of looking across to say, actually, this is done in 3 areas. Can we morph them together and make that a more cost-effective way? It just seems to me that we're given a set of budget figures, and the last 3 years, all we've said is, you know, we don't particularly like this, but there's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied, and I think that's pretty similar message from the other chairs of scrutiny committees have said to me, you know, that they feel as though we're looking at just one section, when actually the ability to look across the council would be of a greater help. And I totally agree with Richard about what did change over that period of scrutiny, or what did change, you know, because always at the last minute there is a little change that comes from members at the backbench to do 1 or 2 very small things to change the budget. You know, but how do we address these issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tom. So I think what I took from the budget member engagement plan was that there is more time in that plan for cross-cutting, for scrutiny chairs coming together. Tracy, I don't know if you want to comment from Councillor Tom's has just said, or yeah, Tracy.
Yeah, happy to. So I having been here for 6 months or so and listening to councillors about how they scrutinise the budget, one of the things that we're trying to work on this year is rather than trying to make savings and make changes to budgets in individual areas, we are trying to work on themes which are council-wide, rather than looking at individual budgets in individual areas, because the size of our kind of budgetary gap is so big, you won't be able to do it just in those areas. So you're absolutely right, Councillor Toms. So what we are going to be bringing to you this time round, hopefully, fingers crossed, is rather than looking at savings in your own areas, we will be bringing to you themes across the whole council and how they impact on your areas. So hopefully that will be more helpful for you. But it's the first time that we will have been doing this, so it will be certainly new, and we'll sort of be learning with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor McKenna next, please.
Leader, thank you. Simply, I don't want to sort of repeat, but I just want to reiterate and reinforce what Councillor Buscombe said and what Councillor Ormond-Thomas has followed up with. I have shared the concerns, but I do welcome the fact that this is the earliest, in my experience, in 7 years, that members will have been sort of formally involved in the process, particularly from a scrutiny and overview perspective. I think the current situation, as has been said, is unprecedented. So I think at this stage I would support the proposal, and I welcome the fact that this is being treated as a priority. That's what I wanted to say. So it's going to be a horrendous process, but at least member input is being maximised, and we're starting as early as we can. So I'm grateful for that, and I would be prepared to move when the time comes if you need a mover for the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Chief Executive next, please, Kate.
Thank you, Leader. The comments that I wanted to make have largely just been covered off by Tracy in her response to Councillor Toms. But so I think that the first meeting in the timetable of bringing together the leads from across scrutiny to understand how we've been approaching the budget will be helpful, and that has also been underpinned by some work that officers have been doing over the last few months called activity mapping. Where we've been looking at the different activities that the council undertakes and understanding how much time and thought is going into them. And this is a way in which that we can have a one council discussion. So we've been looking at, for example, how much time is being spent in undertaking assessments and supporting people with additional needs, because that will be done in adult social services, it will be done in housing, it will also be done by our revenues and benefits team. So it gives us a way within which that we can ask questions of ourselves. Are we optimally configured? Can we be more efficient rather than just having the conversation in directorates? So I hope that will be helpful in us enabling to have some different conversations with you as we seek to try and deal with this unstable financial situation that we're in. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Kate. And yes, indeed, we've got a proposal on the table. Councillor McKenna has proposed it. We'll see whether Councillor Buscombe would like to second it. Councillor Buscombe's next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'm quite happy to second that, but I'd just like to say one thing which I might not have made clear in my opening remarks, which was, I fully accept that this year is an incredibly difficult year, and we've got to get through this year's budget setting in terms of what's before us. But I really want to try and lay down a structure for future years when we might return to something nearer normal, and whatever normal is in local government, because we always seem to have some crisis. But yes, we have to deal with what's before us, but I want to lay down something that future scrutiny committees and future councillors can build on when it comes to scrutinising the budget. But quite happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buscombe. I'm just going to give a moment to see if anyone else is going to indicate to come in. No, in which case we've had a proposer and seconder. So Anita, would you like to take us through the vote, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As the Chairman's just said, we've got a proposal from Councillor McKenna, seconded by Councillor Buscombe, which is the recommendation set out in the report. Please, can I have a show? Can members raise their hands to indicate if they're in support of that proposal? Thank you very much, Chairman. I can confirm that all the members present have voted in support of the recommendation. So members may raise their hands, lower their hands, and that is carried. Thank you
very much. Thank you, colleagues. So we're making reasonable progress, and some of us may want to be at the all-member briefing at midday, so I'm going to carry on. The next item is the discussion on future arrangements for the all-member briefings. So we've seen the obvious change from councillors being in the chamber, or although being able to watch all-member briefings on the webcast, to the weekly all-member briefing session on the Friday lunchtime, which seems to have been very well attended. So it's really around our thoughts about the all-member briefings. I know Scrutiny are also doing some work in informal meetings around having some briefings, perhaps more focused to particular topics for Scrutiny members, but of course wider membership can in general go to those briefings as well. So I know that there's been some LGA guidance just recently published with regard or touching on this. And I think, Chief Executive, you'd like to say a few words about that.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I just want to bring to the attention of this group that the LGA published some guidance on the role of councillors during the reset and recovery phase, and we have been looking at this as officers when it came in, and we had a discussion on Wednesday in respect of the arrangements to have in place with Cornwall Council, and is there anything that we're not doing that we should be doing. I think, having read the guidance, and I will circulate the link round after this meeting to members of the Co-Ordination of Council Business Group, is that actually scrutiny are incorporating into their work programmes looking at COVID and the recovery. I've seen that has come through your work planning discussions. We have also taken forward through Cabinet, the Leadership Board and onto full Council our overarching approach around recovery. But I think that the all-member briefing framework that we have established does provide us with the mechanism through which, over the coming weeks, as we continue to live with coronavirus, we need to, I think, protect some time in those all-member briefings to be keeping members up to date on what is still a very dynamic situation. So I think that my review of the guidance, and as I said, I'll circulate it, is that we've got all of the building blocks in place, but I would still like to have the opportunity in the all-member briefings over the coming weeks and months to make sure that if the situation changes, we have a rapid way of being able to engage members if our response needs to adapt. The head of the Chief Executive's office is here on the call, and he has also been giving some consideration to potential topic areas and a view that we would like to continue to have those all-member briefings throughout August. I know it is a time that members generally protect, but given that we are still in a situation where we're living with coronavirus, if this group is in support, we would like to schedule having those all-member briefings throughout the month as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So, colleagues, we're currently doing the one all-member briefing a week on Friday. So, are we content with that? Are we content that there's some fluidity in the programme, so we can be responsive as issues arise, but equally are there topics that we think should be on the all-member briefings that really need to come through? How do we bring those forward, create a forward programme to give some of those topics that are of concern across all members and airing in this way? Are we happy that those virtual all-member briefings are working well? So I think it would be useful if we could get a steer on that, as well as also the August question. So Councillor Rule, you've indicated to come in. Councillor Rule, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Yes, I for one do really value the all-member briefings. I find them very, very interesting. Always have done, actually, the previous ones before. But I think it's even better now we can do it online. More of us can get there to hear them. So I would definitely like them to continue, and on a weekly basis if that's possible. Totally agree with you on the fluidity of the topics. I think that's important, that if there's something urgent that crops up that we need to be notified about, that should be able to happen. But just as a suggestion, in the past, the scrutiny committees, if we've had a topic that we felt was of a wider interest than just that particular scrutiny committee, we've been able to pass that forward as a suggestion for an all-member briefing. I wonder if that could continue. That might be helpful for topics then. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rule. So I'll go to an officer after we've heard the next couple of councillors in terms of how scrutiny might be able to feed into that list of future all-member briefings. Councillor Hannaford, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I think it's a really good suggestion from Carolyn to feed in topics from all scrutiny. I value them. I think being online is a lot more flexible. It gives a lot more members the opportunity to catch up on topics that they perhaps wouldn't ordinarily come across. The only thing that I think that's missing from it is access for members of the public. I think it'd be and a way to ask questions and to feed into those. So maybe there's a technological solution to that. I'd be quite happy to continue during August because I think we're going to have some really hot topics that just won't keep till later on. We need to really be reacting really quickly to something that becomes important in this ever-changing landscape. So if I was going to make a little pitch for some from my area, it would be the localism strategy that I'm due to sign off probably September, October, after scrutiny have had a look at. And I think there's a topic that it's linked to diversity and equality as well, and that's about gypsies and travellers. I don't think I've ever seen or heard any discussions across the piece, across the authority about that topic, and I think that could really do with a discussion and an airing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaford. So I should probably know the answer to the access to the public question, but when I come to an officer, are the all-member briefings available on the website, even if not live streamed afterwards, is my question. I thought we were recording them. Councillor Buscombe, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I can't really add to what Edwina summed up very well, I thought. And I think this particular year of all years, I do think we need to keep going during August. I think that's very important indeed. But everything else has been said by Edwina. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Buscombe. And so Councillor Toms next, please.
Thank you, Julian. I think when you talk about, these meetings every Friday and, the value they have great value. I've learned an awful lot from, actually doing it, but I can work literally, it starts at home, and then afterwards I pick up my work again straight after, and that is a great time saver with the hour and a half it takes me to get to County Hall sometimes, and that is a value to me and my community, if you know what I'm saying. But the greatest thing is that there must be some way of demonstrating to the public the savings that these meetings have had. If you've got 50 councillors turning up to a meeting, which is quite normal, how many miles has that saved? What impact on the environment has that had? I think it really these briefings have been a good value for money, because they're done on just the cost of our Microsoft Teams time. So if one of the officers could probably do a swift calculation and say to the public, this is what you're saving by having these online, it would be good. And it's like Hilary was saying about the meeting that we have full council. there must be a value in there of how much we're saving for the council taxpayer of Cornwall.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Toms. I know work's been done in general on those financial and carbon savings, but I'm not sure about all member briefings in particular. Anita's signalled to come in, so I'll go to Anita. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I was just checking with my esteemed colleague who knows all about the recording, etc. So at the moment we haven't been making these available to the public because they've contained controlled information. Mm-hmm. So there needs to be a view about what the topic is and as to whether that should be made public or not. Some of the issues have been in early stages of an understanding of what issues are, so they might have contained controlled or sensitive information. So if there is a view about whether they should be made public, then that would need to be taken into account in future arrangements.
I think Anita, we're recording them all, though, aren't we?
Yes,
so
Chairman.
Recorded meetings, yeah. So I think we can take a view probably after the meeting. Was there controlled information within that meeting? A couple of them might be obvious up front that there will or won't be. But if we could take a view afterwards and then publish or not accordingly, would seem a pragmatic way forward on that. Matt Barton, would you like to come in, please, in terms of some of the other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Leader. Yeah, so we can certainly look at live broadcasting the all-member briefings, again, subject to the caveats that Anita mentioned. That's not a problem. We will definitely put the schedule together for the next, let's say, a rolling programme of 8 weeks that'll take us into the autumn with the flexibility that the Chief Executive mentioned, but largely kind of repeat the kind of recovery themes, because I think members are keen to understand what's going on within and being discussed within the recovery groups. I think the budget proposals, obviously, we've got that in the diary now for the 18th of September, but we'll liaise with the chairs of the OSCs for potential other topics that we can include. But as you said at the outset, we've had 60 plus members joining each of the 10 member briefings that we've run thus far, and I'm sure we'll have a similar number going forward. So I'm more than happy to play a part in making that happen.
Thank you very much, Matt. And Alex, next, please.
Most of it's been said by Anita or Matt, but just a couple of other things just to address comments members made. So in terms of ways to ask questions, there are facilities to do that in online meetings, so we can look at that. Scrutiny has a capacity to do something they call a development session. And historically those would have been open to all members. So it's not the same as normal member briefings, very different kind of character of thing, but that's one way that if members of scrutiny committees are trying to learn about an issue and they would like to share that learning with the whole council, it doesn't necessarily have to go through a normal briefing. And in terms of demonstrating the savings based on mileage and impact on the environment and so on, yes, we absolutely can produce a figure, and I'm sure you've all heard before the figure of 42,000 commuter miles a day for the whole council, which includes officers as well. So we can do that, but obviously as for whether it's a saving across the whole, when you consider everything in the round, because the impact of these meetings are that we're slightly less able to conduct certain business and so on. So it's reasonably complicated, but we can definitely do savings just simply on mileage, expenses, and environmental impact of commuting by members.
Thank you, Alex. So I think we've heard the value of having the all-member meetings virtually, so to continue with those irrespective of change and being able to get back into meeting rooms, the value of having done these virtually and continuing to do so for members, the ability to make them public where appropriate to do so. I think we've not got a recommendation. I'm sure the minutes will reflect the discussion. I'm not necessarily going to propose a recommendation, but I think if we could say that in terms of scrutiny feeding in, so Matt's been managing the process of all member briefings, and as leader, I have the say, whatever the right term is, on the programme. I know we normally bring a programme for agreement to this group, but if I can exercise that privilege, then Matt and I can be the touch points for any suggestions for all member briefings, and I think that will help to keep it agile, but also bring forward scrutiny suggestions as and when. Anything that I've missed or anything else we'd like to cover in this conversation? Are we content that the minutes will reflect the conversation? We don't need a recommendation from this, Anita?
No, Chairman, there'll be comments in the minutes about the direction of travel. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone object to my summing up? So it seems as though we've got consensus to that then. So in which case we'll move on. I have no any other business that the chairman considers to be of urgency. So thank you all for a very well managed meeting and well ordered. Thank you all for helping me in my role as chair. And good discussions. So look forward to seeing you all virtually soon. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Hopefully at the all-member briefing in a minute.
Thank you. Time to make a cup and all of that between time.